The Wonderful World of Darklords. Report 5. Halloween Town. When I came to my senses, I was surrounded by the darkness of the sack, moving in a way that suggested that I was being carried by some four-legged beast. I prepared to cut myself free with a dagger when my conveyance stopped, the sack opened, and I was greeted by a sight like a most improbable dream. The buildings around me were in dull grays and blacks, skewed into bizarre angles and curves, and milling about them were monsters of every description. A werewolf, a family of walking dead, a bat with the sweet voice of a child, and more. They were in the process of erecting a circus tent, albeit one rendered in shades of black and orange, and overseeing the proceedings was a skeleton, its body so spindly as to defy belief. Its clothing was simple and utilitarian, and it wore a sword at its hip. I was suddenly put in mind of a traveling carnival I had seen many years ago, and of the woman who governed it. Was this her skeleton? Before I could wonder about this too much, my captors began shouting excitedly to the skeleton, calling him Jack, and saying they had found a magic act for the carnival. This was my introduction to Halloween Town, a land whose jaded king will try on any role for a moment's diversion, but whose ultimate idea of entertainment, to humans, is disturbing at best and deadly at worst.
Welcome to Wonderful World of Darklords. I'm Tom.
I'm Rachel.
And we're discussing how to convert Disney movies to Ravenloft Domains of Dread, because if we tap our horror fan trait, the GM might give us inspiration this session.
Along the way, we'll look at the Dark Lord, the domain itself, and some plot hooks and adaptation ideas to integrate this setting into your own campaign.
Today's episode, Halloween Town.
Real quick logistical note here. In the spirit of mashing up holidays, we are recording this on the 4th of July. We think the fireworks are over.
Yes, the party does not seem to be.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a little bit of after party still going on, but we really wanted to get this recorded. We're super excited about this episode. So if you do hear a random backbeat or sudden explosions, that's what's going on here.
And if the music gets spooky all of a sudden in the backbeat, it means Jack Skellington decided to be Uncle Sam this year.
So yeah, we are really excited about this episode because Nightmare Before Christmas is probably my favorite movie. It's between that and One Cut of the Dead, which people who are able to watch R-rated movies listening to this, if you haven't seen One Cut of the Dead...
It's really good.
Yeah, if you haven't seen it, go watch it right now. So it's my favorite movie about my favorite holiday, meets my favorite game. Like, words cannot describe how psyched I am.
This was like the best and most challenging episode from a lot of perspectives, because if you talk about Disney movies, spooky stuff, horror, this is the number one thing that comes into people's heads, especially for doing animated. But also, this is something so specific for the holiday of Halloween, the kind of cultural experience of Halloween, and so specific for the tone that how we then take that and adapt it to a setting that's none of those things was a real challenge, but one that I hope you will conclude that we rose to. Yes.
One of our biggest challenges here was adapting our Dark Lord because, spoilers for our next section, we did decide that Jack Skellington is a better Dark Lord choice than Oogie Boogie in a lot of ways because, Halloween Town is much more a reflection of him. This is his movie. But there is the obvious problem that he's not evil.
Right. Way back in episode 0, and I believe a little in episode 1, which more of you seem to have listened to, we said one of the potential pitfalls for listening to episodes with your kids, even if we're not getting into any adultish content, was the fundamental premise of taking these movies and making them in a Ravenloft Domains involved making them like darker or more tragic or more sinister. And this is the first really big specific example of that phenomenon I think we're running into.
Yeah, that, Abuela pretty much was the villain of Encanto, just not as much of a villain as we made her. Peter Pan is a total jerk. He's not evil, but he is just the worst.
Terrible person.
But here we are really having to do a version of Jack Skellington that is the worst version of himself. And if you want to do this full horror, again, kind of get a little bit of spoilers here for tone, we're going to be doing kind of like a goofy slapstick Nightmare Before Christmas version of this that would be a lot more lighter and fun. Or we have a version that's really going hard in on the horror. And if we go with that version, it's going to be an almost unrecognizable version of Jack Skellington,
Right.
which could be upsetting to your kids if they're big Nightmare Before Christmas fans. It's something that it's my favorite movie, and part of why I love it is because everyone is so affable. So it's something that I actually had a little bit of trouble with until I cracked my interpretation of Jack Skellington, which we will get to.
Like, if your kids have a bunch of Jack merchandise, or if you are listening to this right now in your Jack Skellington slippers, with your Jack Skellington PJs, sipping coffee in your Jack Skellington mug, on your Jack Skellington sticker-covered laptop, this might be upsetting, because to make this work, we kind of have to do the worst version of Jack. We have to have his worst qualities and take away a lot of his best qualities. And that was kind of hard because he's such a likable character. That's part of why there are people that buy all the aforementioned Jack Skellington merchandise, because he is so likable.
There is a Jack Skellington blanket that my children got me for my birthday within view of our podcasting nest.
So just heads up, we're getting a little ahead of ourselves. We're going to get into sort of our formula going through the Dark Lord just a second. But if you love Jack Skellington, if your kids love Jack Skellington, you've been warned.
Yes. So without further ado, let's talk about all the stuff we've been spoiling in our Dark Lord section. The Lord. The citizens of Halloween Town fawn over their pumpkin king, Jack Skellington. Jack is wildly emotional, swinging from the heights of manic joy to the depths of despair, depending on the progress of his latest project. From the few coherent statements I was able to glean between the citizens' bursts of breathless, rapturous praise, Jack is some sort of spirit or fae, embodying festivals of autumn death into the harvest. He has, however, grown bored with this role and is constantly trying out new ones, with the Mistress of Carnival as his latest pursuit. The town's mayor confided that Jack sometimes sends his 3 cronies to capture the people he impersonates so that he can replace them, and I can see why he decided discretion was the better part of valor in this particular case. I confess that the ceaseless gaiety of the townsfolk both rankled and puzzled me. No matter how much frivolity we insert into these harvest festivals, they are dark and dangerous times at heart, where fae, fiends, and the undead lurk far too close for comfort. None of that darkness was evident in Halloween Town during the preparations, and it seemed almost obscene to turn such a baleful time into a night of frolic. However, at one point I heard my 3 kidnappers whispering about another, more vicious spirit called Oogie Boogie. From what I would later witness, Oogie has all the murderous cruelty that Jack and his admirers seem to lack, although his freedom to indulge in these proclivities suggests that Jack does not entirely disapprove of them.
So we're going into this segment assuming 2 things. Number 1, you know who Jack Skellington is, which I think is a very safe assumption for our potential listener base.
If you're listening to a Ravenloft Disney podcast, you have at least one piece of Nightmare Before Christmas merch in your house. Right. I'm just saying.
Number 2, you know what a Dark Lord is. That premise, Jack Skellington is the Dark Lord, contains those 2 assumptions. So we've pretty concluded we don't have to worry about number 1. But maybe number 2, maybe you saw, a podcast about Nightmare Before Christmas. That sounds fun. I love that movie, in which case, my condolences. But I hope you listen anyway, because we're going to have some fun stuff to say about it. But if that's you, Rachel, what is a Dark Lord?
I love after 15 years you still whisper sweet nothings to me. Well, a Dark Lord is an evil being who has committed some kind of act of ultimate darkness that drew the attention of the dark powers of Ravenloft and made them say, we want to play with you forever. And so they took this being and they locked them in a domain which is a hell of their own creation. It's perfectly designed to torment them, to reflect their psyche, to reflect their evil acts and kind of mock them with the desires they can't achieve. And for our Dark Lords, we usually talk about there being 4 traits that make for a really compelling Dark Lord. So we always go through and talk about how those 4 traits apply to Strahd, who is the Dark Lord who most of us are probably the most familiar with, and then talk about how those 4 traits either do apply to the character in the movie or how we had to kind of make them apply to the character in the movie. Because, once again, Jack Skellington, as written, not evil. Bit of a goober, not evil. So our 4 qualities are... Number 1, the Dark Lord has to commit that act of ultimate darkness.
This is the origin story.
Yes. And in Strahd's case, it was killing his brother because he wanted to get with his fiancée. Number 2, the Dark Lord has what they call in Van Richter's Guide to Ravenloft a torment, and because this is a Disney podcast, what we call they got what they wanted, they lost what they had. And in Strahd's case, it's he got everything he wanted, his brother's out of the way, he has eternal youth, so he doesn't have to worry about being too old for Tatiana, except, oh yeah, now Tatiana is dead and keeps reincarnating, but he can never ever be with her. So it's this funhouse mirror version of what he wanted. Our third is an element of tragedy or relatability. They're not just evil for the sake of being evil. There's something about them that makes us say, oh, gosh, yeah, I can see why you did that. And in Strahd's case, he is a horrible person, but unrequited love is just the worst. And then our fourth is that the domain in some way reflects the Dark Lord, reflects their personality and their curse. And Barovia is vampire land. It's got wolves, it's got bats, it's got darkness and frightened peasants to feed on, and it's just everything a vampire could want. And it's also incredibly boring and doesn't have any kind of pure intellectual equal to Strahd, because part of his curse is his loneliness, and congratulations, you're lonely forever, because you killed your brother. Good job.
So Jack fits some of these quite well already. You probably figured out the fourth one was not much of a stretch for us.
The fourth one is the big reason we went with Jack instead of Oogie, because Halloween Town is it's Jack's domain. I mean, that's all there is to it. He's the Pumpkin King.
But others, we had to stretch a little bit. And the number one where we have to go into our own alternate universe, our darker version of Halloween Town,
is another thing that might be traumatic for your children. Real quick, I'm going to interrupt, because remember, if Santa Claus got away, what if he didn't? We're going to be discussing this in detail. So, consider yourself warned.
So, this is where we have to go off book, because this is where our timeline diverges from the movie, and we'll create this sort of darker shadow version of Halloween Town than from the movie. So in our version, the act of ultimate darkness was kidnapping Mr. Sandy Claus, because in our version, Jack never got blown out of the sky. He never had the comeuppance of realizing how utterly his Christmas was a catastrophe, which is the thing that inspires him to sort of look at all the decisions he's made and realize how many mistakes he's made. So in our version, he just does horrible horror Christmas and flies home for the celebratory spooky eggnog, totally content in the job that he's done, and totally confident that all of his decisions were the right decisions. And in this version, Oogie Boogie eats Santa Claus. And one of the things we're digging into is this idea of the sort of willful self-delusion with Jack, which once again isn't out of nowhere.
Because why did he have Lock, Shock, and Barrel kidnap Santa Claus in the first place? What did he expect to happen?
So in our version, there's this whole Jack... He would tell you he just forgot about Sandy Claus, and then, well, Brad probably solved it. I assume Lock, Shock, and Barrel taking good care of him on a farm where he can run and be free with the other holiday guys.
They probably took him home. I told them to take him home, so they probably did that, and everything's fine.
I'm not going to ask them. Whereas, on some level in our version of Jack, he knew this was going to happen and kind of wanted it to happen, because then he gets to do Christmas again.
He can just be Santa Claus forever.
Right. So that is our act of ultimate darkness. It's kind of the combination of in the movie kidnapping Sandy Claus, but in our version, like when he comes back and has the eggnog and doesn't ask Lock, Shock, and Barrel what happened to Sandy Claus, that's when like the mist came around Halloween Town and brought it into Ravenloft. Then we have that torment. Got what they wanted, lost what they had. Once again, we have to move the timeline forward here from that act of ultimate darkness. And in our version, he was Sandy Claus for a couple years. But you know what? Then he got bored again. It didn't fill the hole. It didn't fill the emptiness inside of him. So then he tries another holiday, maybe. Oogie Boogie eats the Easter Bunny. Or Oogie Boogie eats the leprechaun. Or
Oogie Boogie eats turkey. It's
Oogie
wholesome.
Boogie eats Tom Turkey. And he'll do it, and it'll be fun. But he just keeps trying new things and keeps building himself up and saying, oh, this one's going to be the one that makes me happy. But it never will be. And once again, on some level, he knows this. But he's not consciously willing to because once again, he's got a body count now. So for him at this point to have that realization that he has in the graveyard in the movie, that would be too much. It would cost too much for him.
The sunk cost fallacy is a heck of a drug.
Yeah, it is. Our third element is the element of tragedy and relatability. We've all been bored. We've all been restless. And more than that, we've all looked for some kind of external change to try and fix our internal problems. We've all said, if I could move to a new place, if I could get a new job, if I could get a new haircut, if I could get a new, style or look, if I could go on vacation to a particular place I want to go to vacation to, I would be happy.
Get a new relationship.
Right, get a new relationship. Yeah. Then I will be happy. Then this emptiness inside of me will be filled. And so we can all look at Jack, and even though you could describe this movie as Jack sulks and ruins everything for everyone, and then is sorry, and everyone forgives him, we all, feel Jack's lament. We feel that sense of discontent and emptiness, and we all kind of wince sympathetically when he says, oh, I found this wonderful new thing, and that's going to be what makes me happy. That's going to be what fixes my life.
You couldn't see, listeners, when Tom was describing Jack's torment, that when he was saying, this will be the thing that makes me happy, I was sitting here wincing so hard, because, Jack, honey, that's not how it works.
No, it's not. It's not. If you're not happy being Jack, the King of Halloween, you're not going to be happy being Santa Claus. No. And you're not going to be happy being the Easter Bunny, as much as I'd love to see you in the outfit. Get in the outfit first, and then go to therapy. And then finally, as we said, the easiest, the one that you were like, oh yeah, Jack Skellington. When Rachel was going through them, the domain reflects the personality. I have in my notes here, this is Halloween, Halloween, Halloween. Everyone hail to the Pumpkin King. That he is sort of, in our reckoning, and I think pretty clearly in the movie's reckoning, he's kind of the spirit, the avatar of Halloween. Halloween Town is so much an extension of him, an extension of his whole being, that we had to go with Jack just because he is to Halloween Town what Strahd is to Ravenloft.
Yes.
Even in the movie, just without all the evil and cursing and stuff, but just in terms of the relationship of the core NPC and the place.
And another way, that's kind of it reflecting his personality, but a way that it also works beautifully is it reflects his curse, because part of his curse is that he wants to stop being the Pumpkin King. He wants to be something different, but it will always be Halloween Town. No matter what he does, no matter what kind of lipstick job he does on it, underneath, it's always going to be Halloween Town. And he's never going to get away from that. He's never going to be able to leave it behind. This is a little bit of a spoiler for the domain section. I know, sorry, we're all over the place this episode. Yeah, right. This is a complicated domain. But we're having it be a floating pocket domain, sort of like Carnival, that can go from place to place, because that explains how he can do Christmas in different places. And the image of just wherever he goes, he's dragging Halloween Town with him. He cannot escape it. Even if he's being Sandy Claus, going and doing Christmas somewhere, he is stuck in his Halloween Town domain, and he's pulling Halloween with him, and he cannot get away.
Christmas is going to be spooky and full of skeletons. Easter is going to be spooky and full of skeletons. Valentine's Day is going to be spooky and full of skeletons. It's always going to be Halloween at the base, because it's always coming out of Halloween Town.
As you can probably hear right now, our 4th of July is spooky and full of skeletons.
Right, yes. If we start hearing screaming, then hopefully it's just Jack Skellington. But let's back up again. I keep saying let's back up, because this is a complicated one, everyone.
This one's weird. We love it, but this is a weird one.
Picture me pointing at a corkboard with a lot of red string. And Feywild? Question mark written on it. Most of these domains, we can say, Ravenloft, you've got these little countries, they've got rulers, they've got people living there, they've got different vibes, and everything we've done so far, even the one with all the talking animals, we could just do that. But, how do you do Halloween Town? How do you do it's a town for a holiday, which doesn't exist in Ravenloft, and also it's full of, monsters and skeletons, and also it's do they have trade agreements with Barovia? Do they have a werewolf exchange program with Strahd? What would the 30 exhaustive write-up on the flora and fauna and weather and agriculture of Halloween Town be?
Well, Dr. Finkelstein did an internship in Lamordia.
Yeah, right.
It was really helpful to him.
So we, more than any other domain we've done, or probably will do, need to sort of talk about our conception of where they were before they became a Ravenloft domain. Because everything else, it is a country. It had people. They did bad stuff. Mist happened. Bang. This one, there's a whole backstory just to the domain that Rachel is visibly excited to share with all of you. So I will let her do that. Rachel, what is a Jack Skellington?
I am wiggling in my, literally wiggling in my seat with excitement because we are going to get into all kinds of metaphysics of all kinds of bizarro domains. I'm so psyched. Okay, so our inspiration for Halloween Town, a part of it came from the Nightmare Lands, as it is in both 2E and 5E. Because, in 5E, you're kind of getting sucked into this girl's nightmares, as I recall, that she's having these, she's having these nightmares that are being pulled into them. And in 2E, it was the idea that there were these sort of nightmare gods, basically. And that they sort of occupied this mystical nightmare dream space that they would drag with them wherever they went into your dreams, much as Jack Skellington drags Halloween Town with him wherever he goes. You can see the exact connection here.
I am very happy. This made this domain doable, that we had the Nightmare Lands as a precedent.
Yes.
That we had a well-established domain that was not just a country bordering other domains, or just a place you could go through the mist from other places in the mist, but that was a kind of metaphysical space in another layer of reality from the rest of Ravenloft that you got to from any other point in Ravenloft via dreaming. Like, that is part of the canon back in 2nd edition, brought back in 5th edition. That gives us something we can then build on as a precedent for Halloween Town.
So, in our conception of Halloween Town, this is actually an area where Tom might be doing a little bit more of it, because this is kind of getting to the 5e metaphysics with the Feywild and the Shadowfell. So I'm with great reluctance, give the reins to Tom again before snatching them out of his hands. I want them, I want them for my own.
So we are imagining that across the planes of the D&D universe, in many, many different planets, many, many different nations, cultures, there are the seasons that we know from Earth, and there is the summer changing into autumn, connecting with the harvest, and the sense of winter being oncoming, and winter being a more dangerous time, a more terrifying time. So across the planes, there is this parallel holiday, this repeating holiday of a kind of right in the middle of autumn as you're really coming out of summer, starting to shift into winter, and this sense that this is a holiday around a time when the wall between the Shadowfell, the wall between the world of the dead, the wall between the world of the spirits, the horrors, the whatever, gets thinner. And so people have to do certain rituals and certain activities and have these kind of gatherings in order to ward off, kind of get through that night and ward off the potential evil, dangers, demons, goblins, ghosts that are spooky, scary skeletons that are stalking in the material plane on that night.
In Ravenloft, I believe the main named ones that we get are in Darkon. And we're gonna, when we talk in parting thoughts about incorporating other domains, we're gonna get into this a lot more. Mm-hmm. But Darkon has the Festival of the Dead, which is kind of their celebration, sort of like, thumbing their nose at the idea of death, having big parties where they, have pageants and scare away these, people dressed as brightly colored skeletons. And then Darkest Night, where they say, actually, we're terrified of the undead, we're gonna hide in our houses with all of our lights off, please don't kill us.
Right, I know Kryn had the Festival of the Eye.
The Festival of the Eye, yeah.
Right. In Waterdeep, there's called Trolltide is one. Mm-hmm. Really, it's fun to do a Halloween story. Mm-hmm. So any D&D setting, you can probably kind of find some parallel to Halloween. Mm-hmm. You were like, oh, that's this version of Halloween.
Yeah.
And so you have this powerful sort of psychic resonance across the planes, and it ends up manifesting in the Feywild. And it manifests Halloween Town, which is the sort of living incarnation, the living manifestation of Halloween, of Darkest Night, of Night of the Living Dead, or whatever it's called in Lemuria, of the Trolltide, of all of those holidays, which for convenience, we're just going with Halloween. Mm-hmm. That is Halloween Town. And it had Jack Skellington, the Pumpkin King, who ruled over it. and they sort of manifested the experiences related with those holidays, and also kind of would travel to the material planes to sort of make those experiences, to just be a part of those experiences of the fear of the forces of darkness and the kind of gathering together in communities through that kind of fellowship and that togetherness ward off those forces of darkness.
But
over to Rachel.
Over to me.
Passing the baton.
But things with Jack Skellington as this manifestation of Halloween, as Halloween got more domesticated, as it went from this holiday where you hide in terror from the creatures of the Shadowfell to this holiday where, you go out on Night of the Eye and get cookies or whatever, then we're kind of doing an idea of sort of a Mage of the Ascension / American Gods idea, where as this perception of Halloween changes, it changes Jack Skellington also. He's becoming more domesticated. He's becoming more tame. He's going from, a master of fright and a demon of light who has devastated the souls of millions and frightened hunters into an early grave, to life's no fun without a good scare, that's no job, but we're not mean.
Right.
And actually, I think it's really cool with Darkon that we do have these two holidays, that one is very much just the party day and one is the hide and terror day, that Jack Skellington is really becoming much more the Festival of the Dead guy. That he is just representing this very tame, very domesticated, very fun idea of death. But all of those fears of death, all of those things that we're genuinely afraid of, the actual, worries that something is going to come out of the Shadowfell and grab your children, the actual, we live in Darkon, the undead are not in fact funny. Any of the Halloween decorations that we see here on Earth that we look at and kind of go, that's a little much. I don't want to think about that. That had to go somewhere. And so part of Jack's psyche split off to become the shadow on the moon at night.
You see where we're going with this?
So Oogie Boogie is actually a manifestation of the evil side of Halloween and sort of like a Mr. Hyde to Jack's Dr. Jekyll. How aware of this you want them to be is up to you as a GM. We're pretty much having it be that they don't see themselves as being the same being. Like, Oogie Boogie just knows he came into existence one day. Jack Skellington just knows Oogie Boogie showed up and was awful one day. But they are the same person, and they don't know it. And that is why Jack Skellington has this existential emptiness inside him, because he truly isn't a complete person.
Right. He has lost his shadow. Mm-hmm. Metaphorically and literally in some sense. That he has lost one of the things he's supposed to be the manifestation of the genuine terror of this time of year. Mm-hmm. He's lost that. That's become Oogie Boogie. And that's also why Oogie Boogie has this desire to overthrow Jack and become the Pumpkin King, because he's got that kind of push to be the spirit of Halloween, because he is, in a way, the manifestation of Halloween. And also why Oogie Boogie is kind of darker and more violent and more brutal than anyone else we see in Halloween Town. And why in our version, jumping ahead a little bit, surprise, take a drink, he is pushing to make Halloween horror again, to kind of go back to that older peasants huddled in their little huts around the fire, desperately praying that the noises they're hearing outside are just going to pass through, that the offerings they left out will be enough to appease the spirits, and then just trying to make it in terror, white-knuckling it through the night, hoping to see the dawn. Like, he wants that again. Mm-hmm.
And this is also a way that, splitting Jack in half like this and having it be that Oogie Boogie is also Jack, this is when we're kind of cheating and making it so that if you don't want Jack Skellington to be evil, then he doesn't have to be. That Oogie Boogie is his shadow self. The evil that Oogie Boogie's doing is kind of getting thrown onto Jack because on some subconscious level, Jack is aware that it's happening. But it can be as conscious or as subconscious as you want it to be. And if it is almost entirely subconscious, if he really is repressing Oogie Boogie really hard, then Halloween Town is still a reflection of the Dark Lord. It's just a reflection of another aspect of the Dark Lord. And we do have a precedent for this idea of sort of the dual Dark Lordship with Borka, with Nova Vasa being kind of the Jekyll and Hyde domain, particularly older Nova Vasa, where, as I recall, in newer Nova Vasa, both alter egos are pretty bad. In older Nova Vasa, the Dr. Jekyll was more Dr. Jekyll-y. So there is precedent for it there, and it lets you not have Jack Skellington be so bad if you don't want him to be.
Right. We love Jack Skellington.
Yes.
And it hurts us to make him a monster. We just want to keep him a skeleton, not a monster. So we're trying to build in this slider where you can make Jack as bad as you want to. But as Rachel said, we have a kind of escape hatch where you can be like, yeah, a lot of bad stuff happened and Sandy Claus got eaten. But it's not really Jack's fault. It's not really conscious. He's just kind of the victim of this circumstance that split him. These external forces that split out this shadow part of himself.
Or even if you don't want to see that he's a victim, because, Jack is, in the movie, very willfully ignorant and self-delusional. He makes terrible choices, and Sally tells him they're terrible choices, and he keeps right on doing them. This is all Jack's fault. But he's not evil. He's chaotic neutral at worst. I'd say chaotic good. And so you could have it be, these are genuinely Jack's mistakes, it's Jack's fault, but at the end of the day, he's not the ultimate evil Dark Lord animating force of Halloween Town.
And since we're having Oogie as a co-Dark Lord, I'm not going to throw all four of the things, because he's not nearly as interesting or sympathetic a character, but he does have the fundamental torment of, you know what, no, it's not going to work. You can't be king, you can't beat Jack, you can't restore Halloween. People are not going to be huddled in their huts waiting for the dawn again. It's going to be candy and, wooden troll masks. And that's the torment for him.
Element of sympathy, tragedy, relatability, good luck, you're on your own.
Yeah, have fun.
Oogie Boogie's the worst.
Like, subscribe. If you think of something, like, subscribe, leave a comment.
Yes.
Tell us what you think of. So let's go as Dark Lord. Jack has his own powers, his own dominions, his own special abilities. For the base for Jack, we're using the Scarecrow. It's a low CR monster, but is a Scarecrow. He's literally a Scarecrow the first scene, and does have a fear power. And that's kind of the main power we see him have, that he has this ability to frighten Lock, Shock, and Barrel into good behavior, that he has frightened millions in early grave or whatever. So we'll start with our go-to move when it's a political ruler Dark Lord, and that is the charisma abilities. And the servants that he has, who are all the residents of Halloween Town, that Jack... Number one, he is incredibly charismatic. And once again, that's part of why he's such a likable character, even though if you just read the plot, you'd be like, this is the worst person in the world.
This is a movie about cultural appropriation.
This is a movie about a jerk, and then everything works out great for him. Because he's a little sorry. But he is so charismatic and so likable. And this is one where we've looked at a couple different types of leaders, and this is one where it's just not, they don't just obey him or fear him. There is a little bit of that. We might lose some pieces and then Jack will beat us black and green. But they like him. Like, everyone adores Jack.
Yes.
Everyone
is
the
witch's fondest dream.
Right. Everyone's like worshipfully, fawningly impressed. Like, he's like Poochie. If Poochie were like the great, if he were just the best.
If Poochie were what he thought he was.
Right, and everyone's just always like, literally everyone's like, where's Jack? What's Jack doing right now? Every scene Jack's not in. So he's got this intense charisma. That could be very high charisma score. Also clearly like, that's the charm ability. That's the mass suggestion ability. The town meeting song is like, hey everyone, let's do this bizarre thing in 2 months. And they're all like, a splendid idea. This Christmas sounds fun. They all cheer. And, that's mass suggestion right there. Is I've got this crazy, bizarre plan, and means we have to basically work nonstop for 2 months. And they're all like, that sounds like a marvelous idea. In what is probably normally our off-season and our vacation time.
It's cutting into their time planning into next Halloween.
Right, exactly.
Too.
Like, he was worried losing a day. This is 2 straight months out of the Halloween plan. And then we mentioned that he frightens millions into an early grave, so the frighten spell, that kind of is in the Scarecrow, the ability to do the frighten condition. And then into an early grave, Rachel had the brilliant idea of the Sea Hag has the death glare, which, if the target is frightened, basically they die. So Bingo bango, super frightened, scary you to an early grave powers. Then finally the power all domain lords have, the ultimate plot device power, the power that stops the players from going somewhere else until you are good and ready for them to leave, and that is closing the borders. And so one thing, obviously, you would have the doors be closed, and in the other holiday lands, and then also maybe just you get lost in the woods if you can't find the gates out if Jack's closing the borders. Maybe something with like this mist that makes you more lost, like a classic.
Mm-hmm. And there was mist on Christmas Eve, so
maybe you could even like imagine that as Sally sort of trying to do a version of closing the borders.
She knows people can't leave when it's misty, so she's trying to make it misty.
And then we have Oogie Boogie as our domain lord, and I'm gonna let Rachel talk in a second. I'm not talking much about this, but I'm very proud of the basic stats because
this was all.
This was a lot of work.
Yeah.
Try to find a D&D monster that is like redoable as Oogie Boogie. So in the adventure, The Lost Laboratory of Qualish, which was like an official WotC thing, it's on D&D Beyond. There's all like, it's a lost laboratory, so there's all like the crazy some magical science stuff. And one of them is sentient leather golem armor. So it's basically like a semi-sentient suit of leather armor that someone kind of like made a golem out of leather and then made it so you could wear the golem. So Oogie Boogie, that's Qualish. So Oogie Boogie has stats similar to a swarm of insects inside, in this case, a fully sentient suit of leather golem armor.
What if 3 kobolds in a trench coat were horrible?
Or 300 spiders in a trench coat. So other powers Oogie Boogie might have.
Well, he has his followers, but I don't think that he has any sort of supernatural control over his followers. Like, Lock, Shock, and Barrel are worshipfully devoted to him, but we never see him, like, use any kind of whammy on them, so I think it's more just he lets them indulge their worst selves in a way that Jack doesn't.
Or even that they're really one of the darker ones, and they recognize him as sort of the true, like, in their mind, he is the true spirit of Halloween. Like, he is what they want Halloween to be. Because they would love to be actually setting people's houses on fire and not just throwing eggs at them.
Yes. So, much like Maleficent, now we have 2 Dark Lords who don't have any kind of bad suggestion charm stuff, so good job, guys. One thing that he does have, though, are a ton of lair actions. He's got clockwork creatures, he's got construct, he's got whirling buzzsaw traps, like any kind of clockwork lair action trap you want to put into his little crazy casino, you can throw in there. He definitely has a frighten ability like Jack's. You know, we don't hear about him frightening people into an early grave, so I don't think he has the death glare, but he does have the frighten. He, again, doesn't have the charm. Nobody likes Oogie Boogie, except Lock, Shock, and Barrel. And the other thing that we see him do is when Sally is sneaking in and trying to rescue Sandy Claus, and he sees her, "You're trying to make a dupe out of me!" He does that big, like, summoning this huge wind and sucking her off of the wall. So would work as being a gust of wind, only he could pull you toward or away, because if he can blow in addition.
You could imagine that. Like, he blows someone away as well as sucks them in. Now, this is the part in the last couple episodes where we have gone through and we have talked about the trait, the ideal, the bond, and the flaw. And we have been doing a thing where we, like Rachel, will pick some quotes and we'll kind of talk through which one we think best represent the trait, ideal, bond, flaw. That takes a bit, because it is sort of the live process and the talking through, going through the thought process.
And it would especially take forever in this one, because there are so many quotes for Jack. The past couple that we've done have been Peter Pan and Maleficent. They don't get villain songs. Jack has 4 songs that are all about his interiority.
Right,
He's got Jack's Obsession, Jack's Lament, What's This, and Poor Jack. And they're all about just what's going on in his head. So it would basically just be me reading the lyrics to those songs to Tom, plus a couple of other quotes here and there.
So we're doing something different. We are each going to have prepared our thoughts. Like, go through those songs. We each pick what we think for Jack for the trait, the ideal, the bond, the flaw. Same thing with Oogie Boogie, since we're him as a co-Dark Lord. That's a shorter list of possibilities. Probably a lot more overlap there.
It was a real challenge to come up with a trait for Oogie Boogie.
And we're going to go through them. We're going to talk about why we picked it. And then go from there.
We're gonna each kind of pitch our trait, ideal, bond, and flaw, and then decide what one we're gonna go with.
But as I mentioned, this is a section of the episode that takes up some time because we kind of have to talk through it, go through the thought process, consider possibilities. Do you, dear listeners, want us to do this? Keep doing this as part of the episodes. We're going to put up a poll on our Twitter and on our Facebook.
Our Facebook is Wonderful World of Darklords. Our Twitter is Wonder Darklords.
And in the poll, we'll just say, do you want us to keep doing what we're doing, where we kind of talk through it live on the air? Do you want us to just have that conversation, just present those? Or would you prefer we just leave that out entirely and it's there on the DMs Guild write-up of the domain if you want to go see what our thoughts were on those things?
And if you want us to do it on the air, do you prefer it the way we did in the previous episodes, or do you prefer it the way we're doing it this episode?
So yeah. Make your voices heard. In the spirit of the 4th of July,
yes.
Go and vote and make your voices heard as to how you want us to go forward with this feature. So here we go. We're going to go through the trait, the ideal, the bond, and the flaw. We will each give our choice for that for Jack, and then for Oogie, where I expect to be a lot more overlap because he doesn't have 4 songs about his interiority. He, in fact, has 1 song, mostly about his exteriority. So let's just jump right in. Rachel, for Jack Skellington, what quote do you have for his role-playing trait?
I had, year after year, it's the same routine, and I grow so weary of the sound of screams.
Very, very close to mine. Mm-hmm. I have, oh, there's an empty place in my bones that calls out for something unknown.
I originally had that, and then I changed that over to his bond, because I feel like his bond is to the unknown, and like calling out to that. Like I had a couple others originally that were like Christmas specific, but I feel like we wanted to have kind of the more general idea of him longing for the unknown for his bond.
So we both agree. This is a thing we talked about when we were planning this section. These are NPCs that are particularly tricky to do these because we are imagining them, and Tim Burton is imagining them, as the personification of these holidays. Of Jack is the king of Halloween, not just the reigning monarch of Halloween, but is sort of the spirit and the personification of Halloween. And that means the trait, the ideal, the bond, they're all going to be interconnected.
Yeah.
So we're basically both hitting the same note, but we're trying to say the same thing with our role-playing trait choice.
So I'm curious, what did you have for his bond?
What I have for his bond is, and I, Jack, the Pumpkin King, have grown so tired of the same old thing.
I thought really hard about that one. Yeah, I think that was a close runner-up. So I think we can go with your trait and bond because that was I came real
2
close
for
to
me,
that one.
listeners.
Because then you get that he's the Pumpkin King and that he's tired of the same routine.
Right, exactly. That's the thing, is that with the bond, because the bond is what is the most important relation to something external. Mm-hmm. So it's usually a person, but it could be an organization, or in the Lost Mind of Phandelver starter set, you even have this wizard and their bond is to their spellbook. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of a spellbook / journal of their experiences, and that's their bond. So it's the most important thing in their life.
Yeah. I had to be that his most important bond is to his ennui. But
yeah. And the reason I like this, if you're clicking, I'm writing down so we can put it in the write-up, because this is a process. So for me, this one, the trait, the empty place in my bones that calls out for something unknown, is that whole, the ennui, the emptiness, and that calls out for something unknown, that he's trying new things, a desire for novelty, driven by the sense of emptiness, that's what's driving a lot of his actions in our positing of Jack. And for the bond, I picked, I, Jack the Pumpkin King, have grown so tired of the same old thing, to try and sort of the two-sided. He's got that ennui, he's got the getting tired of the same old thing, but he is the Pumpkin King, and he can't stop, and the kind of interplay between those two parts of who he is.
And even when he sings it, it's the very bombastic, the Pumpkin King, and then the very mopey,
right, I've grown so tired of this. Okay. All right, 2 for me, listeners. All right, ideal. What have you got for that?
I'm curious, you might have this as your flaw, because this can be very close to doing our choice for his flaw, but my ideal for him was, I'll bet I could improve it too, and that's exactly what I'll do.
I'm pointing and grinning, because yes, that's my flaw.
See, I had it as his ideal, because his ideal is the improvement.
Right,
it's important that he really does think that he's going to be able to improve these things.
No, absolutely.
So...
For me, the ideal, I have the empty place inside of me is filling up. I simply cannot get enough. I want to know, I want to know, I want it for my own.
Yeah. Yeah. I came real close to having I want it.
Yeah, right.
The flaw. For the flaw, I went with why should they have all the fun? It should belong to anyone.
Yes.
Not anyone, in fact, but me!
That was, we were all, like...
circling the same.
Looping. Because we're all looking for quotes that communicate the same ideas. Mm-hmm. Jack has, like, 4 separate songs that are communicating a lot of these same ideas. Mm-hmm. And it's just which line more clearly communicates the specific aspect of Jack we're trying to communicate. Mm-hmm. So even, like, that's my longest is, you know, normally, like, it'd be, like, the 2 lines, so it'd be the empty place inside of me is filling up. I simply cannot get enough, and I'd stop there. But, you know, I have to have the I want it for my own.
Yes.
Because that's the heart of his mistakes, is not just the empty place is filling up. It's I want it for my own. I have to have this, I have to possess it. But no, I bet I could improve because that is the ideal. So yes, I think we'll go with that. So type. I'm writing it down in our notes. I bet I could improve it too. And then the parallel, because here, once again, these are so interconnected.
Yes.
That the ideal and the flaw are this sort of 2-sided coin, this Ouroboros. So we have a bet I could improve it too. And what's the line? Why should they have all the fun?
Why should they have all the fun? It should belong to anyone. Not anyone, in fact, but me. Which, again, was my longest, because you gotta have that whole thing.
Right, you have to have the but me. Not anyone, in fact. So in both cases, we have... He's being driven by the ennui, and he's encountering these amazing experiences, but the sort of the dark side of that, he wants those experiences, and that's kind of the ideal. Mm-hmm. But the dark side of that is this sort of self-centeredness and the selfishness and the not anyone, in fact, but me. I bet I could improve it too. Like, yeah. I want it for my own. That kind of desire to possess this experience in a way and not just sort of let it happen.
He can't just enjoy it and be a bystander. He has to own it.
All right, Oogie Boogie, as we said, expect a lot more overlap.
Tom chuckled when I said that I had a hard time choosing Oogie Boogie's trait. I did, in fact, have a hard time choosing Oogie Boogie's trait. The ideal blonde and flaw were easy, but his trait is, being a giant jerk to Santa Claus.
Right, yeah. Plus, once again, all these are sort of interconnected. Like, I'm Oogie Boogie, I'm a bad dude. Like, that's all of these things.
You can't have your trait be, you're joking. That doesn't really make sense.
Right, if I, could explain it to you. See, what I'm saying here is that he's very skeptical of the claims, but we can't do that. So, all right, what do you got for the trait?
For his trait, I had, I'm really scared. Kind of the sarcasm, all he cares about is intimidation. That, he's not impressed by Santa Claus, if Santa Claus isn't scary.
Think about that, but that's a good one.
I had to dig deep. I had to dig deep for the trait.
So my trait and my flaw are kind of parallels. Mm-hmm. And for the trait I have, it's much more fun, I must confess, when lives are on the line.
I had that first flaw.
Yeah. With the flaw, if I may jump a little bit, dear listener, I have this with a parallel to that, which is because I'm a gambling boogeyman, although I don't play flaw.
Yeah, I thought about both of those, and I went with...
What's your flaw?
It's much more fun, I must confess, when lives are on the line. Not mine, of course, but yours. Oh boy, no, that'll be just fine. I think
so much. It's like you need the whole
too
thing.
Much.
It's so wordy.
I think the gambling boogeyman is better for the flaw.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And even the idea that, he cheats, and that's part of the flaw, but also, your PCs will get it if you throw this NPC at them who's a gambling boogeyman, although he don't play fair. They will get how to interact with this dude. They will get how to, problem solve with this dude. Okay, I'm running really low on power, so I'm just going to go through my last 2 real quick.
Okay.
So, my ideal is, this is my longest one, it's hopeless you're finished, you haven't got a prayer, because I'm Mr. Oogie Boogie, and you aren't going there.
Ooh,
nowhere.
I didn't even think about that one.
And just this idea of, I win, I dominate, I'm Mr. Just the idea of I'm Mr. Oogie Boogie. I'm the Oogie Boogie man. You can't escape, you don't have a prayer. And my phone's about to die, but for the bond, this is the one I'm proudest of, is I have I'm the shadow on the moon at night, filling your dreams to the brim with fright.
I had that for his ideal. I had
I
had his bond is the sound of rolling dice to me is music in the air.
Ooh, that's interesting.
That his strongest emotional connection is the game.
Ooh, yeah, let's do that. So, sound of tickety-clickety-click. Sound of rolling dice. Yeah, the strongest connection, the strongest emotional attachment is to gambling. And then, so for trait and ideal, I hope we remember what I just said, because my phone's is basically dead. So, what are you thinking for trait and ideal?
Okay, so for trait, you had gambling boogeyman.
I had gambling boogeyman. We kind of got that with the flaw.
Yeah. Did you have Gambling Boogeyman for the trade, or did you have much more fun at Must Confess with Lives?
I had much more fun, I must confess, with Lives on the Line, but I feel like we've kind of captured the gambling stuff pretty well.
So, Ooh, I'm Really Scared was what I had.
Yeah. Ooh, I'm Really Scared. And then we both really zoomed in on that I Am the Shadow on the Moon at Night.
I didn't think about that Mr. Oogie Boogie and You Ain't Going Nowhere. That is a good idea also. But this is really what we're going for. It's him being kind of like the dark god of Halloween.
Right. Like the one that I knew I was going to use for something. Mm-hmm. And it was the I Am the Shadow on the Moon at Night, filling your dreams to the brim with fright. Because that is the line of Oogies and the aspect of Oogies that we have most zoomed in on for our perception. Mm-hmm. That he is, as you said, the dark god of Halloween.
So, yeah, we've got our trade ideal bond and flaw for both of our co-Dark Lords here. And once again, we're going to have Facebook and Twitter polls. Let us know, do you prefer it this way? Do you prefer it the way we did it in Peter Pan and Sleeping Beauty? Would you prefer we just present it as a fait accompli? Or do you want us to just not talk about it on the podcast at all? So, let us know.
So we talked about how it was so tricky because both of these are the kind of these living avatars of Halloween. So who they are and what their strongest relationships are and what guides their personalities is all wrapped up in that. But there also means they have this kind of unique connection to the domain, even more than a regular domain lore, because this domain itself is also a kind of avatar of Halloween. So let's talk a little, we talked a little about how we developed the Dark Lords, let's talk a little bit about how we developed Halloween Town.
The Land. After a few days of madcap preparation, which involved teaching 4 fastidious vampires to swing from a trapeze, using alchemical concoctions to hide the mayor's reflection, and pressing a doll-like construct into sewing dozens of circus tents, as well as drilling me in Jack's expectations for my conscripted magic act. A mist rose around Halloween Town, and when it cleared, we were in Richemouleau's capital city of Pont-à-Mousseau. The city was between outbreaks of the Gnaws. Thank the gods for small favors. But those who came expecting a jolly carnival would probably have preferred a few weeks of quarantine. The less that is said of the audience participation in the snake handler and fire eater acts, the better. Although most of the monstrous performers seemed oblivious to the spectators' terror, a few seemed to delight in it, and I noticed my 3 kidnappers performing subtle acts of sabotage to make the routines more frightening and dangerous to the humans who were forced to watch them. I am reasonably certain that more than 2/3 of the people who entered the Hall of Horrors were supposed to leave it with their limbs intact, and I know for a fact that my hat was supposed to contain a rabbit and not a miniature hellhound. I didn't even know they came in toy breeds. The 3 children, a thoroughly unpleasant clown, and a hulking undead figure occasionally escorted one of the wounded toward a crooked treehouse on the outskirts of town. None of them ever came back, and by the end of my unwilling visit, I discovered why.
As we said in the intro, I'm so glad that we have the Nightmare Lands as our precedent, because that helped for Neverland, the idea of this sort of secondary reality as part of Ravenloft, in Ravenloft canon, that we could build on that, but even more so because Neverland is much more of a place, whereas Halloween Town is much more of an idea. And the Nightmare Lands is not the only source material you're drawing from to come up with this very bizarre, like, I feel like if we worked at TSR or WotC, they would have, like, given it back to us. I'm like, no, this is too much. This is way too high concept. How about, like, Mummy Land? Like, could you just pick a universal? Have we done a Phantom of the Opera domain yet? Like,
but this is the Kohlers, and I love Nightmare Before Christmas, and Tom loves Claymation, and we both love Ravenloft, so you're stuck with it.
Yeah, sorry, imaginary editors. We're gonna do this really bizarrely high concept domain. So, Rachel, as someone who loves Nightmare Before Christmas and Ravenloft, tell us about what in the metaphysics of Ravenloft is Halloween Town?
I have been preparing my entire life for this moment. My goodness.
12-year-old Rachel just like stirred her head up and heard the call of destiny.
My hour has come.
Yes.
So as Tom mentioned, and as we mentioned when we were talking a little bit about Jack, back in the Lord section, we are using the Nightmare Lands as a major precedent for this. The idea of it sort of being this, like, free-floating concept, even, more than a domain. And with the Nightmare Lands, you can't get there unless you're dreaming. It used to be, like, before the Grand Conjunction, you could just walk over to the Nightmare Lands from Barovia.
Be that imaginary TSR editor's like, yeah, cool, put it on the map. We'll put Halloween Town on the map. Left of Vorka.
And, like, I haven't read the supplement in a while. There might be a way to get to the Nightmare Lands while you're awake, but the main way to get there is through dreaming. So we can have a similar thing with Halloween Town. Maybe you can get there just holding your spooky pumpkin mist token, or because Lock, Shock, and Barrel show up and grab you in their bag and drag you away to Halloween Town. Or if you're in kind of like a Halloween-y frame of mind, or like Halloween is coming up, you might accidentally take the wrong step and fall into Halloween Town.
All right, we see a little bit of this with Jack. He just goes to a random graveyard. Mm-hmm. There's not like a special magic tree door. It's just like a graveyard, and he can open a tomb and go to Halloween Town. This idea there's like all the places of the world where it's Halloween in spirit.
It's a very Changeling the Lost, actually, now that I think of it, because they have a whole thing in Changeling the Lost about how you can enter Arcadia through these, kind of esoteric, like, you jump over an open grave, and when you land on the other side, you're in Arcadia. So if you want to get your Changeling the Lost on, then number one, let's be friends. Yeah. Number two, Halloween Town is a good way to do it.
I didn't even think to put that on the bingo card. But good job, honey.
I love you so much.
I love you too.
So the Nightmare Lands is one of our big inspirations for kind of having the idea of a metaphysical concept as a domain. Our other inspirations are domains like Carnival, or Sire 1313, or in the older stuff, Sienna. There is this idea of these floating pocket domains, that Carnival's not just in one place. Carnival will go and it'll visit Darkon, and it'll visit Invidia, and it'll visit Rishmallow, and just Carnival goes everywhere. And so with Halloween Town, we have the same sort of idea, that either you can get drawn into Halloween Town and see all this wacky stuff, or Halloween Town can come to you. Just like we saw in the movie with Jack bringing Halloween-y Christmas to Earth. The Ravenloft description of that would be he's sort of bringing Halloween Town with him. The floating pocket domain is coming and superseding itself over some poor, hapless Ravenloft town that's just trying to have its winter solstice festival, and then this nonsense happens.
And there's a skeleton giving people murder plant wreaths.
So sometimes it's a Mist Island, and sometimes it's going to other domains, just like it did in the movie. And we have kind of some adventure ideas for both of those, because in our conception of Halloween Town and of Jack, we don't want it to be tied as much to specific holidays as it is in the movie, because then, like, what even is Christmas in Ravenloft? You don't want to necessarily do a deep dive into Ravenloft holidays.
Yeah. Like, we did a whole Googling for D&D setting equivalents of Halloween. You shouldn't have to do that. And also, those things aren't going to have any kind of emotional punchiness with your players. If you're like, oh no, a skeleton has taken over Farfig Night. And you have to be like, well, Farfig Night was a 300-year-old festival celebrating a victory over the... Like, yeah, that's not the impact of taking over something they immediately sort of recognize what Jack has done and the bizarro version they've wandered into.
A version of that we came up with, the whole idea is that Jack is going to these other places and being inspired by these other places. Well, as you've picked up probably from the D narration in between here, in Ravenloft, that means he's going to these domains and picking up on what's going on in these domains and trying to start acting out these stories that he's seeing there. That he wants to try being Isolde. He wants to try being Alanik Ray. He wants to try being Van Richten or Strahd. Or for some incomprehensible reason, Vladeska Drakov. Why would you want that,
I mean,
Jack?
try everything else,
Yeah. He'll try anything once.
Right. The fun of Nightmare, and the sort of dark, delicious fun of the second part of the movie, is making Christmas. Is the just weird, grotesque, cheerfully, like, twisted funhouse version of Christmas. And we see making Christmas, and we, like, wince and laugh, and it's great. And the way to bring that experience into a Ravenloft game, especially kind of like domain hopping one, is they get these bizarre, grotesque carnival funhouse versions of domains.
Mm-hmm. Especially domains your PCs already know and are familiar with. You know, don't do bizarre carnival funhouse version of Daemon Lu if they've never been to Daemon Lu. But if they've just did Daemon Lu a couple months ago, and then suddenly they're coming to Jack Skellington's Amazing Masquerade Ball, that's going to be a blast.
That's going to be hilarious. They're all the Halloween Town people in ill-made ball gowns and masks and shouting trick-or-treat at each other, because what else do you do when you dress up in a costume and a mask?
Yes!
Like, or just you think you're in Falkovnia, but Vladislav Drakov is a skeleton in armor and is yelling at the zombies for breaking character. And the zombies are like weird Halloween Town people in zombie costumes.
No! You're supposed to be mindless!
Sorry, Jack! Just, right, it's great. Half the reason we decided to do this episode for our October one is we just kept making each other giggle with, like, coming up with Jack variants of domains.
So we'll talk about this more when we get into the adventure hooks, but you could do kind of that. He's superimposing into the domain and, you know, doing his weird parody of the domain.
Let's call that the kind of carnival version.
Okay.
Where you're in regular Ravenloft, and then Jack swoops in with his posse and makes everything real weird.
Yes.
And then we have another kind of story you could do where it's more the Mist Island version, where you go to Halloween Town.
Mist Island, Halloween Town, it might be that they're, like, you know, kind of building some weird structure within Halloween Town to play in. Or it might be that you are Santa Claus. Congratulations.
Yeah.
Just like Dee, you have been kidnapped and brought to Halloween Town, but unlike Dee, it's not because they want you to be like the magic act in the carnival that they're going to be taking to other domains. It's because Jack is going to go and be you, or because Jack has, like, built a dungeon and wants you to participate in it.
Right, yeah, like he's the fighter, but he needs a cleric.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, and we'll get into this more, it's either you are playing like the people of Earth during Christmas, or you are playing Santa Claus. Like, that's who your PCs are in our two kind of story ideas.
And I know we're kind of jumping ahead because this is usually the stuff we talk about in Dread Possibilities, but it's kind of critical for understanding how we're spinning Halloween Town here. So, sorry guys, this episode's a little bit scattershot.
I mean, like it was like corkboard, red string.
Yes.
Halloween? Question mark? So
Tom is making this work for me. It's Nightmare Before Christmas and
yeah.
Ravenloft. This is my birthday present, guys.
So, Halloween Town itself, like, imagining that you're not doing Carnival, that you're doing Mist Island, that your PCs are Santa Claus, that they have come to Halloween Town from the regular world. Here is how I am imagining Halloween Town as a polity. As weird as this is. It's like the most bizarre. Despite the fact that of all the domains, this one has a mayor. Like, to imagine Halloween Town as a setting you would interact with. We're imagining it that you do have those two people vying for control. You've got Jack and you've got Oogie Boogie. And once again, we know that Oogie Boogie does want to take over. He does want to kill Jack and become king of Halloween. And that in the movie, it's pretty much just lock, shock, and barrel. Like, that have that. But our imagining is Jack, because he's doing this weird cycling through lives and making them do all this different stuff, and many, many, many Halloweens have gone by that they haven't participated in, it's actually causing a division in some of the Halloween Town people. That there is a sort of political faction now of Oogie Boogie loyalists. And that the sort of hook of the cult of Oogie is to go back to Halloween. You know, we're Halloween Town, we're just going to do Halloween. But then the sort of second level doctrine is we're going to go back to old Halloween. We're going to go back to blood and sacrifice and people huddled in their huts while we kill anybody we find as we roam through the streets on All Hallows Eve. So to do a quick go through of the Nightmare people, because this is one of those things where I think a lot of you know all the NPCs of the setting. And so
have merchandise of various
yeah,
things.
right. Like, we're looking at a set of figurines right now
Yes.
that have all these people I'm about to talk about. So
maybe we're just projecting on you.
Yeah,
but I
right,
feel
sorry.
like you're our...
You clicked on Nightmare Before Christmas. You know what you're getting into. You've been to Hot Topic. So We've got the Jack loyalists, and they're the dominant faction. They're with various levels of enthusiasm going through these whole, like, cycling through different holidays, different lives, different domains. The mayor, obviously, because he's so sycophantic to Jack. Mm-hmm. We've got the witches, we've got the lake monsters, because they seem to really be into Jack.
Oh, yeah.
And then, like, most of the others are like, going along basically for Jack's sake. They're, like, less enthusiastic about this project. Many of them want to go back to Halloween, but they're so loyal to Jack that they're going along with it. And that tension could cause some of them to flip over. For the cult of Oogie, we have got, obviously, Oogie Boogie. We've got Lock, Stock, and Barrel. We're imagining it's also now been joined by the clown with the tearaway face, because he's the worst.
He's just nasty.
He's a jerk.
Not a nice guy.
That's the one that's like, wow, this is a nightmare. A Wolfman, cool. I'm the clown with the tearaway. Oh, God. Oh. Hope I don't dream about that tonight. So he's really like some of that old dark. He wants to kill people on All Hallows Eve.
Yes, he does. He wants to tear away their faces.
Right, yeah. And then we have Behemoth, who's the one with the overalls and the axe in his head. And that's more, and this could be a fun NPC to go with, that's more because he's bros with the clown with the tearaway face.
Yeah,
we see him like chest bump in the congratulations scene.
Mm-hmm. And I think he's sitting next to him in the town meeting. Yeah, they're buddies.
So. And so he's kind of trusting him and going with him, but he's not so into the ideas. You get he's kind of very simple. Bunny! He's very simple-minded.
Comes across as kind of gentle, even.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So
maybe I'm just projecting Lenny from Of Mice and Men on him, but...
I mean, they had him go, Bunny!
Yeah.
That could be fun character for your PCs to flip. Mm-hmm. The sort of... PCs love the, like, gentle giant who's got bad friends.
Yes.
And then they can, like, get them to, like, no, do what we say. We're your good friends now. And so that could be good. And then we're also imagining that kind of the newest member is the Wolfman, the werewolf, because he's kind of mean, kind of snarky. He's got that whole screaming, aren't you scared? And this is Halloween. He snarks at the mayor a bit, so that he's...
64!
Right, he's willing to go against the grain a little bit. He's a little nastier, so he would also... He's the one I'm imagining that he's really into the idea of going back to just Halloween. And they're sort of trying to work him into going back to, also, it'll be fun to eat people. And then we got two sort of wild cards, and they're connected. And one is Sally.
Obviously.
And Red, obviously. So she rejects both of these, because she obviously rejects Oogie Boogie.
She'd like to join the crowd in their enthusiastic laugh,
exactly,
but try as she may, it doesn't last.
And now it's just plural for those things. So we like this movie, guys. We didn't write down these quotes.
No.
So... She is the one that sort of rejects both, is not helping Jack, is still like holding out, got a torch for him, still holding out hope of reaching him. And she's going to be really important because she's going to be like the helper NPC. Mm-hmm. She's going to be the one that meets your PCs, that is not a part of the craziness going on, that's willing to answer questions, to explain things, to help them escape. And then we also have Dr. Finkelstein. And Dr. Finkelstein is interesting because he, like, clearly has respect for Jack and affection for Jack. But, like, when Jack comes to his lab, he says, "You'll come in, my boy," which is sort of like he likes him. He's happy he's doing science. But it's less worshipful than a lot of the other. Like, it's sort of equal or even paternal. And also we're imagining Dr. Finkelstein is important, making all these, like, crazy automatons to do, and all these machines to do all the bizarre stuff Jack wants to do, to do all the, like, various domains. He made the skeletal reindeer. Maybe he's the one making all the zombies to be Nightmare Before Falkovnia. And he is like a wild card, because he's clearly got his own agenda. He's not really a part of either, and he's really important to Jack's, like, plans and Jack's program.
Mm-hmm. And he's got... There are ways that Oogie Boogie can work him, or would be able to if Oogie Boogie were more subtle. Mm-hmm. That if really, I think the only reason he's still with Jack is because Oogie Boogie isn't canny enough to take advantage of all of the potential fractures and fissures there. That, like, Sally she basically abandoned Dr. Finkelstein because of her infatuation with Jack. It'd be very easy to play on that. You could very easily do Dr. Finkelstein as this Mordenheim-esque character who really wants to do much darker, scarier experiments, but is being held back. You could do a version of him where he's given side-eye to Oogie Boogie and kind of wanting to go over there, but Oogie Boogie is just so uncouth.
Or if you wanted him to be sort of the mini-boss, like he's the main antagonist, the PCs are tangling. You don't want to go the full Oogie stuff, but he's the main antagonist the PCs are tangling with because he wants to do bizarre experiments, and then, like, Jack kind of stops him. Like, when Jack finds out. If you want to have a kind of a nicer Jack, and he's sort of the main villain, and even that's a villain the PCs can sort of beat.
Yeah.
They can beat Dr. Finkelstein, and then Jack scolds him.
You could have, actually, that Dr. Finkelstein is trying to manipulate Jack into being darker.
That would be
since he is working with Jack and he sees Jack, and he has this kind of paternal feelings towards Jack, that maybe he sees Jack as someone who needs to be guided.
Yeah, absolutely.
That could be interesting. That he's trying to kind of turn Jack into Oogie Boogie.
And he's got his new lady creation, his new Promethean, since we're apparently doing...
We've had Mage and
Right, yeah, we're doing World of Darkness games. His creation, Jewel Finkelstein. And we know nothing about her, and that's nice. That's a place you could go a lot of ways. You could have her be that she's very loyal to him. You could have it be that she's sort of his good side or his bad side. You could have it be the idea that she's the one that can sort of outthink him because she is him. You could have it be that she's kind of, resentful or jealous of Sally. You could have it be that she has got a great affection for Sally. We also don't know Sally's relationship to her at all. So this is something, because we just see, like, the one shot of her at the end. We don't see any interactions. I think Sally kind of smiles when she sees the new...
We just see the back of her head.
Okay,
Jack sees him and does a double take, and then he looks to see Sally's reaction, and Sally is so beyond it, she doesn't even care. She's going off the spiral hill.
But so you, the GM then, you have a lot of places to build this kind of, whatever the most interesting soap opera for you and your players is going to be. And the great thing is that soap opera, that kind of weird relational triangle of the Finkelsteins, is going to be something your PCs can interact with, and something that's going to influence their time in Halloween Town. It's going to influence how they interact with Halloween Town and how they, like, kind of overcome whatever challenges in Halloween Town. So to get to the town itself as a setting, these are the NPCs, the relations, the political alliances. To get to the town itself as a setting... You know this, like, there's Jack's tower, there's Finkelstein's lab, there's the town square, there's Spiral Hill, there's a pumpkin patch. You maybe have Christmas ornaments.
There's the lake, or perhaps the lake monster found ahead.
You can buy little replicas of these for $80 on Amazon.com. But just a couple points. So, first... We are imagining at the town square, and then the witches have a shop where they sell, like, potions, alchemical ingredients, things like that. And you do, because Jack throws the coin to the musicians when they're playing after This Is Halloween, when he's going to the graveyard, there's some kind of money, right? There's some kind of currency, there's some kind of economy. And so the witches have a shop, and that's from the video, that's the PS2 game. So your players, it kind of makes sense. You can put witches, they make potions, they have a store. So they can go to the witch's shop and they can buy things, they can buy supplies, especially anything magical or alchemical. Then there's the issue of Sally. Like, Finkelstein seems ready for her to go. Maybe you want to have she still lives in Finkelstein's lab, but I wouldn't do that.
No.
And the great thing is, to go back to the relational stuff, which is more interesting than the geography, that we even have, like, Sally keeps escaping and doesn't want to be sort of controlled by him. When she drugs him and he falls asleep, she puts the blanket on him. So it's not just, like, hatred. There's clearly more of a complex relationship there.
There is affection there.
So, like, he's not, her horrible jailer. He's, like, her really overprotective dad. So maybe Sally has her own place. Like, we see her hang out in the cemetery, so maybe there's something in the cemetery, or maybe she just has a little, house somewhere in the town square, or somewhere in Halloween Town. Maybe she lives in a big pumpkin, I don't know.
And actually, talking about potions and alchemical stuff, Sally's good for that, too. We know that she's a consummate herbalist with her frog's breath and her worm's wort and fog juice, so that could also be a place to go to kind of get, like, probably not as complex as what the witches can do, but some herbal stuff done. Right,
or it could even be the interconnection, like she works with the witches. She gets herbs to sell them, and so that could be a way. They go to the shop to buy some stuff, they meet Sally that way. Also, we see her doing cooking, so maybe she has kind of like a restaurant inn type thing. And once again, that could be a way for the players to hook in with Sally, is they're like, hey, we're hungry, we don't want to eat skulls or severed heads. And, like, you smell a delicious smell of, like, stew coming from this little restaurant, Sally's Place. And you go and you meet her, and she welcomes you and says, you're Outlanders, and so the first bowl's on the house, and blah, blah, blah. And then now you're friends with Sally.
And then get your soup flavored with frog's breath.
Exactly.
Congratulations. And
now your PCs are friends with Sally, so you did a good job today, GM. So yeah, Halloween Town is Halloween Town. It's one of the most well-documented of any of these domains we're looking at in terms of the specific locations.
We don't have to do spooky versions of any of these settings because it's Halloween Town.
Everything's weird and geometric. So we're talking about your PCs, meeting Sally, interacting with her, interacting with Dr. Finkelstein and Jewel. But let's talk about now how those interactions would look. What brings your PCs there? What do you do when you're there? Rachel, what do you do with it?
Dread possibilities. Eventually, the mimic that had replaced my disappearing box decided it was tired of eating one victim at a time and began rampaging around my tent, and I used the distraction to cast invisibility and slip away. I knew that speaking to the Pumpkin King would likely end with me on stage again, and that my ultimate destination from there could well be the treehouse, so instead I took advantage of the opportunity to spy on him. The terror of the spectators caused him neither distress nor sadistic glee. Instead, he chortled over how much they were all enjoying themselves, even as the mirror maze turned their hair white with fear, and he genuinely seemed to believe it. Perhaps the horror of the Harvest Festival is alive and well in Halloween Town after all. I could not consider my survey complete until I investigated the treehouse, so I crept there while still under the protection of invisibility. From a pit near its roots, I heard shrieks of terror, loud clockworks, and, of all things, rolling dice, with gibbering laughter over it all. The air was rich with the scent of a hearty, meaty stew, leaving little doubt as to the victim's ultimate fate. While Jack is unaware of how much his actions terrify humans, Oogie knows, and revels in it.
I want adventure in the great wide somewhere.
I want it more than I can tell, especially if it's in Halloween Town. So there's always the question with these domains of why do you come here, why do you end up here? And as we touched on in the previous section, there are many ways this can happen, and some of them involve your PCs having a choice and others don't. One is that your PCs are taken to kind of be NPCs, be figures in whatever lunatic fantasy Jack is dreaming up. You are Sandy Claus. You are going to be, he's had Dr. Finkelstein has, whipped him up a replica of Castle Ravenloft, and you are going to be the adventurers who attack Castle Ravenloft, except one of you who has to be Irina. Congratulations.
Yeah, right. Who looks best in a red mop wig.
Yes. Or maybe he wants to be you. He's heard about your amazing exploits. This could be, especially after you've had some really major victory, then maybe Jack wants to recreate it. So he's going to take you, consider it a vacation, and you're going to be with Oogie Boogie. There's nowhere in the world more comfortable than that. So Jack is going to go and, assemble a couple of other Halloween Town residents to go be a party and relive your exploits. And you are going to be trying not to get made into Snake and Spider Stew.
And this is like he brought you there to consult.
Yes.
Like, with Sandy Claus with the hat. To sort of, give him some role-playing tips. And, how would you walk? How would you, how would you swing your sword at the zombie? Show me, oh, okay, like that, thank you.
And then in that case, you're trying to talk Jack into letting you go. If that doesn't work, you get taken to Oogie Boogie. You have to escape Oogie Boogie, and then you have to rescue all of your NPC friends from this bizarre skeleton who's claiming to be you. Another thing that you could do is, if you don't want the PCs to be taken, then maybe some NPCs who are important either to the setting overall or just to your PCs gets taken. Van Richten gets taken.
Yeah.
Ez gets taken.
Alanik,
the Weathermite Foxgroves. Right. Yeah, any of those major NPCs could get taken, or just, again, if you have some person who's important in the PC's lives, who you think would be, have a life that would be interesting enough to draw Jack's attention, then that person could get taken by Jack.
If there's the inn that's kind of their home base, then, the innkeeper gets taken because Jack thinks it would be fun to have, an adventure inn.
Yeah. Or
to be an innkeeper for a couple of months. Mm-hmm. And that's the one where it's intentional. That's the one where your PCs choose to go to Halloween Town. The others are you're just swept up in Jack's lunacy.
Speaking of swept up in Jack's lunacy, the other option is if we're doing kind of the carnival version, then Halloween Town drops down on wherever you're staying and is just doing its madness, and you are stuck being the recipients of the gifts / the audience of their version of carnival / fighting off the zombie horde or being the zombie horde, whatever bizarre wackiness Jack happens to be doing.
So this is, in the movie, you are kind of a combination, as we said, of the people getting the bizarro gifts and the soldier shooting at Jack. So you are A, running around putting out the fires, possibly literally, and B, trying to either convince Jack to stop or just sort of try and redirect him to a less horrible course of action, to sort of ride it out till like it's Christmas morning, or he gets bored and moves on.
Yeah, just kept running around doing damage reduction as much as you can.
And the great thing is Nightmare Before Christmas, your players probably would have a fun time just running around dealing with killer ducks and evil wreaths and just sort of putting out Jack's fires.
Yes, trying to stop up the chimneys. And then you even can try to be, getting through to Jack and getting him to have that poor Jack in the cemetery moment.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the main story that we have here, is surviving Jack's bizarre funhouse world. And it might be because you've gone there on purpose to rescue somebody. It might be because you've just been drawn into it unintentionally. There are some ways you can bring in additional stuff if you want to. If you're really interested in this idea of the warring aspects of Halloween, which I personally am madly in love with. I would be all over this idea.
Especially if you're going to Halloween Town and want to engage with more of the Halloween Town residents and the kind of setting as we've established it.
Yeah. Another thing that's going on here is that Oogie Boogie is trying to be the true king of Halloween, right? So that means that he's going to be trying to find ways to either, undermine Jack, make him look foolish, kind of make the people of Halloween Town lose their confidence in Jack, or he might be trying to find ways to make Jack's escapades bloodier and more violent.
Right.
That this is kind of the sacrifice that feeds him as a Halloween god. And he's going to be kind of tricking Jack into bringing even deadlier and deadlier Christmas toys to deliver. Into, having much less concern about whether or not the zombies that he's fighting are Dr. Finkelstein's clockwork creation or actual people dressed up as zombies. That Oogie Boogie is going to be feeding on whatever bloodshed Jack is causing while he's pretending to look the other way and not notice that it's happening like he did with Santa Claus.
This is the thing, that we are imagining this is Ravenloft, this is a darker version of Nightmare Before Christmas. So in this version, that wreath ate that lady. Like, she's dead.
Yeah.
And maybe this is why this is happening be with Jack. That this is like the old blood sacrifices. This is like the werewolf and the clown with the tearaway face tearing away people's faces.
Yeah.
This is Halloween killing people.
And deep down, this is what Jack wants, because he's the god of Halloween, and this is what Halloween was originally supposed to be about.
This is the emptiness inside of him is being filled with blood and murder.
And he would never acknowledge that because he's kind of the domesticated version of Halloween. But that is what's making him feel satisfied. In feeding Oogie Boogie, since Oogie Boogie is him, he's feeding himself.
That's a pretty grim possibility. And that is something we're going to touch on a little bit more. Once again, to keep in the spirit of the episode, we've jumped ahead a little bit. That's a lot of what we're touching on. I'm sorry, guys.
This episode is all over the place. We apologize.
It's like with the ideal trait and bonds, all interconnected. Like, it's hard to talk about one part as they're talking about all the rest of it.
It's like, because the domain is weird, the Dark Lord is weird, and the adventure hooks are weird, and we all have to be touching on all of their weirdness all at once. So I really apologize if this episode makes sense to absolutely no one but us. The next episode's going to be much more normal.
It's not a weird, mystical psycho realm of the concept of the autumnal harvest festival of death. It's just like a place with people in it. So, before we keep jumping back into that, though we previewed a little bit, before we get the aging up, let's get into the aging down, which is the first of our dread possibilities.
Yes, when we do our dread possibilities, we like to talk about aging down and aging up, because we figure there are going to be two kinds of people listening to this podcast, or one person who incorporates both sides of this person.
Like Jack and Oogie Boogie.
Like Jack and Oogie Boogie, yes. Our Jack side is you want to do something lighter, you want to jam for kids. You're listening to a Ravenloft Disney podcast because you love the idea of jamming Ravenloft, and you want to specifically jam it for your spooky kids without giving them nightmares.
So you're like, ooh, Disney.
So that's what our Aging Down section is about, with less grim blood and murder.
Yeah,
We're running this
less
for your
human
kids.
sacrifice.
Yes. Our Aging Up section is where we have more human sacrifice, because we figure you don't have to have kids to love Nightmare Before Christmas or Disney movies in general. You might be looking at this for inspiration for running Ravenloft for your adult groups, and in that case, you might want to look at some of this horror stuff head on. So Aging Down is when we look at running this for kids. Aging Up is our Oogie Boogie, where we look at doing this as just straight horror, no breaks.
The Ravenloft side of the equation. So Aging Down. You probably can guess it's kind of do Nightmare Before Christmas. It's really... Don't get into the metaphysics of Jack as the Dark Lord. Just have it. It's Oogie as the Dark Lord if you have to have a Dark Lord. Jack is still doing his stuff. He's still taking holidays or domains or adventure experiences or domestic lives or whatever. And it's very goofy. The lady's not eaten by the wreath. And it's much goofier violence. You know, if you chop the zombies up, they're just sort of like their head is complaining and telling their body to come find them and stick them back on. And this is even, you rescue Jack from his tunnel vision.
Yes.
Well, in this version, Oogie's the Dark Lord. His torment is he'll never be king of Halloween. He's kind of manipulating Jack into doing this bad stuff. And you give Jack that graveyard moment of realization of saying, no, this is wrong. I should just go back to being the king of Halloween and doing Halloween and not wreaking misery on people's holidays. And they feel really good. They feel really happy. Maybe it snows. Everybody sings a reprise of What's This? And then, boop, on to the next domain. Job well done for your little PCs.
Also, presumably, Santa Claus is just fine.
Yeah, right.
Either don't touch on it at all, or he's just still captured in Oogie Boogie's and you get to rescue him.
You could even do a boss fight with Oogie, and then they tear him open, like, all the bugs spill out, and also all the captured people spill out.
Oh, I like that.
Right, yeah,
like that. Yeah, the classic.
Yeah. Right, yeah.
The classic, like, cutting open the big bad wolf, and everybody...
Right, everybody comes out, and it's all fine. Yeah.
Oh, I like that, yeah.
And then it can snow and new reprise of What's This? But let's say, once again, you're more on the Ravenloft, Oogie Boogie side of our equation. Rachel, can we make this, like, real dark?
We absolutely can.
Yes, not just like a goofy lark.
Not just a goofy lark,
good.
no. So if you have kids in the room, future Rachel is going to come in and tell you how far to skip ahead now. This is future Rachel. Honestly, this section didn't get a whole lot darker than what we've already been talking about, especially what we said happened to Santa Claus. We're pretty much just talking about how to do a horror version of Nightmare Before Christmas that still feels anything like this wonderful, goofy lark of a movie. We do, that does mean talking about horror versions of the characters and some of the things that Jack Skellington does to, like, toys and whatnot, that maybe he could do those to people, but we talk about that pretty obliquely. Honestly, if your kids are fine with what they've heard so far and they were in the room, they should be fine with this. But if you do want to skip ahead, then go ahead about 9.5 minutes to around an hour 36 or so. A big part of Aging Up is going to be really playing into that idea of, the blood sacrifice, the grim awfulness. I was having trouble with this for a while because, as you've mentioned, Nightmare Before Christmas is my favorite movie. I love Jack Skellington just the way he is. I really don't want there to be an evil murder hobo version of Jack Skellington.
Eats human souls and blood and blah, blah, blah.
Like, even though he canonically has frightened millions into an early grave, I don't want that Jack Skellington. But spoilers for genres of horror, because if this was once again, we're jumping around, because that's this episode. Yeah, so, spoilers for genres of horror, the linchpin for me figuring out what I wanted to do with Jack was thinking about genres of horror and realizing that if you've seen Gravity Falls, you could really do Jack as a more affable version of Bill Cipher. If you haven't seen Gravity Falls, stop right now. Go watch Gravity Falls. We'll wait. Gravity Falls is way better than anything we could bring you. Yeah. Bill Cipher is baby's first elder god.
Right.
He's just cosmic horror, bringing chaos and madness to the world. And that's what Jack is doing, but he thinks it's fun and he thinks it's what people want. You can totally see the idea of these people falling into the hands of this lunatic god who's making everything dark and sinister and twisted, but he thinks it's what people want. He thinks it's fun, because one night a year it is.
Right. Life's no fun without a good scare.
Yes. And all of that stuff, the duck and the vampire doll and the wreath and the snake, that would be so fun on Halloween, but you're not looking for it on Christmas. But he's bringing it every day of the year, and he's bringing it everywhere you're going. And so just that version of Jack really playing up that sense that he wants to bring chaos and darkness, but not because he's like evil and wants to destroy everything, but because he thinks that's what people want.
Right, because on Halloween night, that's what we want. We want fear. Mm-hmm. We want macabre morbidity and terror, and we want the shadow on the moon at night filling our dreams to the brim with fright. Mm-hmm. But that's the only button he has to push, is horror. Mm-hmm. So he's making everything horror, and that juxtaposition can be goofy, and that juxtaposition can be horrifying.
So doing that as a version of Jack Skellington is really the thing that made the idea of Evil Jack work for me. And hopefully it'll work for you.
Right.
If it doesn't, I'm about to talk about some ways to kind of make Jack more evil and more sinister. If you don't want to have Jack be Bill Cipher, but you also don't want to have Evil Jack Skellington, another option here is to kind of have it be more of an homage. That you're doing sort of just this weird Harvest Festival-based domain, and maybe you have a skeleton ruler in a pinstripe suit, but his name isn't Jack Skellington. Because that way you're kind of separating from the goofiness of Nightmare Before Christmas, because that movie is so wonderfully goofy. You're separating from the idea that Jack Skellington is a fundamentally good and decent person, or skeleton, or Pumpkin King, or whatever.
Dude.
Yeah. And that can let you really dig into the horror of the concept of a Halloween-based domain and of these kind of like dual gods.
Sort of dark harvest gods.
Yes. Without having the baggage of, goofy Nightmare Before Christmas.
But I have a plushie of him.
Yes. Both making it silly and making you kind of hate yourself. So, for this darker version, one possibility is to have Jack be more conscious of what's going on. That he's kind of deliberately letting Oogie do this. That we kind of have this version where he is deluding himself, but if you ever pointed out that he was doing it, he would be horrified, he'd be in denial, he wouldn't believe that he was doing this thing. But you could have there be a version of this where he is much more consciously being the good cop to Oogie's bad cop. Another possibility, we kind of have this idea of Jack and Oogie as being sort of equal figures, but you could have it be that one of them is kind of the true self and the other one is the mask. You could have it be that Oogie Boogie is the real god of Halloween, the real king of Halloween, and that Jack Skellington is just sort of this, like, affable mask he wears with no real consciousness of its own. Almost kind of like doing the mayor with his two faces with this. That it's
right,
only one of them is really conscious at a time. And in that case, the torment would be that everyone likes his fake self better than his real self. Mm-hmm. And that he has to play it being this fake Jack Skellington. Or again, you could have it be that Oogie Boogie is a mask. That Jack is deliberately being evil, but he has to have this good cop, bad cop persona. So he's kind of created Oogie Boogie as this evil shadow self that everyone can put their negative feelings on while he goes on getting all the love. Sort of abuela-esque there. Another way that you could make it darker is by making Sally a darker figure. And again, if I were to do this, I probably wouldn't have her be Sally. I'd have it be this very abstracted, homage.
Susie Ragdoll.
But you could have... This would really be a fun way to pull one over on your PCs.
Right. Really Rianne Johnson, your players here.
Yeah, because they're going to be expecting Sally to be their best friend. But the obvious kind of solution here is to have Jack and Oogie unite into one being, right? That their whole torment is because they're split in two, and so neither of them is complete.
In our metaphysic, that is the thing that will give Jack peace. Mm-hmm. That is the Oogie Boogie, sort of the emptiness. Is he's missing Oogie Boogie, and it's having him and his shadow become one person again, that is the thing that would ease the ennui and the emptiness he's trying to fill with these externals. In our version of this.
Harvey Dent needs to accept Big Bad Harv. He needs to accept his negative feelings.
It's like drink for generational pop culture nerdery.
And so you could have this version of Sally who's manipulating the PCs, trying to kind of bring Jack and Oogie together. That rather than being on team, I want to save Jack just for his own sake, and then we can have smooches, it can be team, I want to bring Jack and Oogie Boogie together, and then he can be my evil Pumpkin King, and I will be his evil Pumpkin Queen, and we will have evil smooches!
The great thing here is it even is still from a place, potentially, of authentic love.
Yes.
That Sally recognizes, just like with how she's the only one that recognizes what's going on, how bad an idea this is, she is the one that recognizes the divided Pumpkin King, and who knows the only way to actually make Jack happy and give him peace is to reunite him with his shadow self.
And then the other big thing we thought of for aging up, making it darker, is, with Jack's obsession, you've got the part where he's, dissecting the teddy bears and stuff.
Yeah, you see where we're going.
You see where we're going with this. It's pretty easy to see where this can go. And, once again, if I were to do that, the big thing is with some of the other domains that we've made extremely dark, like, say, Encanto.
We sure, boy, howdy.
With Encanto, all the thematic darkness was there. We did not bring a single drop of thematic darkness to Encanto. It was all right there. With Nightmare Before Christmas, all this, crazy harvest god duality. This is all us.
This is kind of our own weird, thoughts about Halloween.
Yes.
And its role in society, so we're sorry to subject you to this, but it's our podcast.
Sorry, not sorry.
Not sorry.
Ultimately, with Halloween Town, the darkness is all aesthetic. There's no thematic darkness to Nightmare Before Christmas.
It's so goofy.
It's such a fun, fluffy movie. And so if you wanted to be doing this setting that had a lot of thematic darkness, and once again, my way of doing it would be to really try to divorce it from Nightmare Before Christmas, have it be very kind of loosely inspired by Nightmare Before Christmas. That said, it's your game, it's your table. If you think that your table would have a lot of fun with, Jack Skellington dissecting people and secretly being evil, then by all means, have a blast, go for it. These are just kind of our personal thoughts on how we would make it work for ourselves.
I feel comfortable saying everybody loves Nightmare Before Christmas.
Yes.
And if you don't, you're the problem.
If you don't, why are you listening to this episode? You saw what the title
But everybody
was.
loves Nightmare Before Christmas, but we all have different kinds of feelings and things we love about it. And you and your players just kind of come up with your own way you want to interact with Nightmare Before Christmas as a Ravenloft game. Maybe as a goofy lark. Maybe as a serious exploration about the idea of Halloween. Maybe a serious exploration about the idea of duality and the acceptance of one's negative self.
Just if you loved Nightmare Before Christmas because it was so fun and goofy, go with that. If you love Nightmare Before Christmas because seeing a, dark grayscale Disney movie full of skeletons blew the top off your head, then go with that.
This is also the section where we talk about AUs, alternate takes on this. And we kind of did a bunch of that just now with the aging up section. Here are a half dozen ways to make this darker and more adult horror. I have one more final suggestion. It's not even much of an AU, but it technically is in our setting. Because our setting is Jack's kind of moved way past Christmas. He's been doing this for maybe centuries now. He's cycled through holidays, and so the whole sky's the limit in terms of what thing Jack is doing when your players interact with him.
Oogie Boogie's eaten so many people.
Yes, so many people. But what if he hasn't gone past Christmas? So let's say it's December, and you're running a session for your players in Ravenloft, and it's you talk about how they come to this town, and the Winter Solstice Festival is coming up, the Yuletide, and Father Yule is going to come and give presents, and they're like, oh, okay, doing a Christmas one, all right, wonder what we're going to do, maybe Scrooge, that's got ghosts. And then you have, it's the night, the Solstice Eve, and they start to hear screams, and there are rampaging toys, and they have to fight the rampaging toys and save the little children and the old lady from getting eaten by a wreath. And they look up, and suddenly the Yule Father looks like a skeleton in a Yule Father costume. And they're like, holy bananas, we're doing Nightmare Before Christmas.
Your players will pee themselves.
Yeah, they will have so much fun. So if it's December, you're running Ravenloft, looking for something to do, you're welcome. Like, you're welcome. Do Nightmare Before Christmas. Make them think you're doing a Christmas, but you're doing a nightmare. And that's technically in our setting an AU, but I want everybody listening to do it.
Spoilers for the players in my Ravenloft game. One of whom is sitting next to me.
Do it. So, I'll act surprised. So, the other room is probably going to listen to this. So that is a pretty exhaustive look at different iterations of this core possibility. Yeah. And let's then go into our parting thoughts in a section that we like to call
Parting Thoughts.
So we start our parting thoughts section with a discussion of the genre of horror. And we mentioned there was a little bit of a spoiler here, cosmic horror.
Yeah.
That this is the fundamental... I was leaning cosmic horror just in terms of being an insane funhouse version of reality. Mm-hmm. And then Rachel was cool and got into an actual darker, horrific iteration of that same core idea.
I could tell that I was really grokking this darker version of Nightmare much more than Tom was, and I realized that it was because I was really grokking this fundamental idea of Jack Skellington as Bill Cipher.
And so that's the core horror here, is cosmic horror, that it is a twisted version of reality, and even the fact that this is this powerful being from another reality imposing that reality, and that makes things horrifying. Imposing Halloween on everything. And for a second one, I believe you mentioned you had a tenuous thought for a second one.
I have a couple, actually. I have two thoughts for a second one, that both of which I like. And one is for the carnival version, and that is you could actually do kind of a slasher with it.
Interesting.
Because the idea is Jack is going to all these houses and delivering the crazy gifts or whatever, or kidnapping the people, and you're trying to stop him. That he is kind of taking people one by one, or, delivering horrible time bombs to people one by one, and that you're trying to stop that. So
yeah, I like it.
Yeah, one is Jack as slasher. The other is if you're doing the Mist Island version, then you are going to this community where everyone has bizarre different rules and worships this horrible harvest god and is bringing you in and acting as though things are for your own good, but you're actually being drawn into their malevolent paradigm that's going to kill you. This is folk horror out the wazoo.
Everyone hail to the Pumpkin song.
Everyone hail to the Pumpkin King. Who is in a Wicker Man?
Right, yeah, who burns himself in a Wicker Man. I like it. That's neat. That's
Thank
a very
you.
Yeah, because if you're doing the Mist Island, then that is basically folk horror. That you are coming to a bizarre, twisted place with bizarre, twisted beliefs and practices. So good on you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe dark fantasy, just for you're sort of engaging on that kind of mythos level. You're engaging with the narrative of what does Halloween mean, but that's good. That's way better. Our thing we like to do here is talk about what type of story, what type of game you play in this setting. There are some domains where, like Barovia and Curse of Strahd, where you can do a whole campaign, like Curse of Strahd, where there's tons of plot hooks, tons of NPCs, where there's just months and months and months and months and months, if not years and years, of gameplay possibilities around that domain. There are others that are one specific sort of adventure, one specific story, where you're expected to just go in and do one thing and then leave. This is one, I think, even more than a lot of the others we've done, that is one adventure.
Yes.
There's one story here. That there is the story of either, as we said, you are just living your Ravenloft life, and then a skeleton comes and makes everything weird, or you go to Skeleton Land, and everything's weird. Either you're kidnapped and you have to escape, or someone else is kidnapped and you have to rescue them.
Because with this only being one story, even more so than other ones, we are deliberately doing this as a very archetypal story. There's not a lot of psychological depth here. So with Encanto, there's only the one story, but there are all these psychologically well-realized NPCs. You're going to be going in, learning about their relationships, trying to pull all of them out. It's one story, but it's a story that could take several sessions. And this really, there's not a lot of depth here, deliberately.
If you have 4-hour sessions, this is one session. This is one of those. Maybe 2 tops. And this is even 2 if you want to dig into all the background and politics we've come up with Halloween Town. That's going to be 2 sessions.
Yeah.
So how do we then incorporate this? What ways could they interact with Halloween Town, living their regular Ravenloft lives?
Well, as mentioned, one of the things that we're doing here, one of the ideas that you can take, is having Jack sort of ape one of the domains that the PCs have already been to. And that could be literally any domain. He could be, having Dr. Finkelstein build him a crazy train so that they can be doing Sire 1313. He can be doing the Damon Lu masked ball. He can be inviting you to a dinner party full of poison with poison plants that you have to survive because you're pretending to be Ivana today. There are just any option you want to do for kind of doing a weird parody version of the domains that you've already visited. He can do that. He can do like his version of a mod you've run. If you've run House of Lament or a certain section of Curse of Strahd, then maybe Jack heard about this and thought it was neat, and he wants to build his own House of Lament, dagnabbit. There are a couple ways that could work. One could be if he's bringing a different domain to the domain that you're currently in. So, he's dropping his weird, Damon Lu costume ball thing into the middle of Falcovnia, and there's all this zombie survival horror or, Man's Inhumanity to Man horror, depending on what Falcovnia you're doing, and suddenly there's a fancy costume party, and the incongruity of that could be extremely fun, and seeing the other NPCs reacting to that could be fun. Another possibility could be if he's trying to kind of, again, he wants to take that domain, but he bets he could improve it. So he's going to Damon Lu and throwing his own better costume party. Or he's going to Mordant and he's doing his own Mordentish ghost story, but it's wrong. Everything's not quite right. You're investigating these ghosts, and they're not acting the way the ghosts are supposed to. So either one of those kind of incongruities, those weird, twisted versions of the domains could work and could be really fun. And
the reveal that it's Jack Skellington
yes!
is going to be a great moment.
It's have
your phone recording, because it's going to be a heck of a moment.
The other interesting thing you might actually be able to do with this, speaking of folk horror, is you might be able to do something with Tempest, because Lorinda is actually trying to do to the tithe what kind of has already been done to Jack. She wants it to be this fun, happy, joyous celebration, right? She doesn't want people to think about someone's going to be sacrificed. So you could actually play into the idea of Jack being sort of this representation of what Lorinda wants the tithe to be versus Oogie Boogie being the darkness of what it is. I'm not sure exactly how you bring that into a Tempest session, but it would be a really interesting thematic thing to play with doing Halloween Town either before or after doing a Tempest session.
Or you could, if you have players that have read the book or familiar with Ravenloft, this could be a fun curveball. They go to Tempest and they think all right, here we go. Sumer is coming in, and then boom, Jack Skellington.
Boom, Jack Skellington.
It's a bizarro Jack Skellington version of the tithe.
Yeah, that would be great, actually. Jack Skellington is doing his version of the tithe games, and they're all horrible Halloween games.
Right, they're all severed head bowling and... So we wrap with talking about strengths and challenges of doing this domain, running this adventure. We hope we've pitched you enough ideas that you've gone, ooh, I want to do that with at least one of them. What are the strengths? What are the challenges as we kind of step back away from Halloween Town, reluctant as we might be to do that?
Oh, gosh.
And strengths is great. Mm-hmm. We're reluctant to step away from it. It's Halloween Town. You love Nightmare Before Christmas. Your players, whatever their age, probably love Nightmare Before Christmas. There's the immediate engagement. You're going to have no work at all to get your players to care about and and interact with Jack or Sally or Oogie Boogie. And that this is also a great way if you want to do a kind of commentary meta parody of stuff you've done so far. So if you've seen Avatar, there's the episode Ember Island Players. If you kind of want to do a spooky Halloween Ember Island Players of your game, you're just running Curse of Strahd. You're just running Curse of Strahd, totally normal. And then you have this, two-parter where suddenly they wake up and Strahd's a skeleton in a wig and is doing this, bizarre burlesque of the Curse of Strahd. Like, that's going to
He's being Twitter Strahd and talking about his capes all the time.
Right, that's going to be...
Twitter Strahd!
That's going to be so much fun for your players. That's going to be so great. And the fact that it's Jack Skellington doing his version of Barovia, like, that's going to make it work even more fun. And you can, like, engage with the story. You can avoid getting murdered by toys or whatever. And then you can either survive it or convince Jack to stop. Mm-hmm. And everybody has a fantastic time. And then you're back to your Curse of Strahd game, only there's a lot more running jokes and memes for people to reference.
And if you're doing the darker version, again, there's a lot of really good, juicy thematic stuff there to sink your teeth into. And maybe it's just us. I'm
yeah, right.
super into this, like dark and light side of Halloween thing.
I want to do a game exploring the concept of what is Halloween, and if you feel like your table wants that, especially if they're grown-ups and can dig into some of the darker aspects, some of the sort of innuendo of the holiday, then this could be a blast and a good, like, structure to do that premise.
Mm-hmm. But that kind of ties us into some of our challenges, which is... if you want to do something that's kind of that dark and serious, it's going to be real tricky tonally doing it with Halloween Town. Doing straight Halloween Town, Ember Island players like Jack Skellington is doing the Tithe games, it's going to be goofy. And if you're fine with having a couple of goofy sessions, then fantastic, have fun, that's going to be great. But if you want to kind of have this darker, more serious tone, if you want to have a consistent tone of horror, that's going to be tricky.
Don't do this.
Don't do this, yeah. And then on the flip side, if you have it be, dark and scary, if you want it to be this darker version, then for a lot of tables, having it be Nightmare Before Christmas isn't going to be as fun because, again, we love Jack Skellington. We don't want him to be evil. We don't want the werewolf to actually be eating people. We don't want the witches to be, acting like they're in the movie The Witch with Anya Taylor-Joy.
Right, we don't want the clown with the tearaway face to be... if you had the clown with the tearaway face tearing off people's faces, there's little that's very dark and edgy Nightmare Before Christmas.
So getting the tone right, we were telling a friend that we were planning on doing Nightmare Before Christmas as our October episode, and he said that doing Nightmare Before Christmas in Ravenloft almost seemed like it would be parody. And once again, if that's what you want...
that's a lot of what we're giving you is parody.
I mean, we cited Ember Island players, for gosh sakes.
So just very, very tricky to give you and your players what they love about Nightmare Before Christmas as a serious horror setting.
Yes.
Like, that can go wrong. That can just be dumb really fast.
Because Nightmare Before Christmas is such a perfect movie tonally. That it's so, again, aesthetically dark without being thematically dark. And so... again, for me personally, if I were to bring in thematic darkness, I would have it just be much more of an homage and, not have the characters' names be the same and change a bunch of the stuff so it's not as obviously Nightmare Before Christmas.
So, strengths, challenges, whatever's best for your table, whatever iteration's best for your table. There's a lot of good here. There's some challenges here, but we hope we've at least given you some fun thoughts about Nightmare Before Christmas and some fun stuff to think about.
And if you haven't seen Gravity Falls, go watch it now.
It's also on Disney+. So, before we rejoin our narrator and find out where she's going next, let's talk about how, if you do run this, or if you do have some ideas about how to run this, some things we haven't thought of, how you can reach out and contact us.
Well, you can email us at wonderfulworldofdarklords@gmail.com. You can find us on Facebook at Wonderful World of Darklords. That is also where you will be able to find one of our polls for how you want us to do our ideal trait, bond, and flaw. The other poll is going to be on Twitter. And on Twitter, Wonderful World of Darklords is too long. Wonderful Darklords is also too long. So you can find us on Twitter at Wonder Darklords.
Let it never be said, we are serious all the time. We are not going to have an element of goofiness. And if you like our work, you like how we adapt things, you want to take this and run this because you're like, tone be darned, I'm going to run this and it's going to be great. Then I'm going to write up our kind of canon version that the others were iterations of. I'm going to write it up as a domain in the Van Richten's Guide style. I'm going to put it on DM's Guild for free. We'll link to it in the show notes. I did all our domains, so you have that as a resource to run adventures for your players. And if you do, please tell us.
Yes.
We would love to hear.
Yes, please.
We would love to hear about people actually running these. But I've adapted a couple of horror movies into D&D Adventures, into sometimes specifically Ravenloft Adventures. If you just check Tom Kohler, click on other works by this author, then you can check those out for yourself. We also have some resources for running horror or more spooky themed games for younger players. If, once again, you're like, I really like the advice they've given, and I want to run, I have spooky little children, but I don't want to traumatize them with my D&D game.
We hear you. So do we.
Yes. So there might be some stuff that would be helpful to you there. Once again, just looking for Tom Kohler on DM's Guild, you can find what we've done.
And then for me, if you like the way that we bring together spooky stuff and kids stuff, I have a picture book, Mother Ghost Nursery Rhymes for Little Monsters, which is exactly what it says on the tin. And if you go to my website, www.rachelkohler.com, Kolar, like polar but with a K, you can find the short stories that I've written for adults. This is Future Rachel, jumping in with one more contribution. The problem with recording these episodes so far in advance is that every now and then something like this will happen where one of our wonderful contributors has something come out and we haven't recorded a plug for them because it wasn't out when we recorded the episodes. So if you enjoy the bits at the end that Azalin writes for us, and really who doesn't, because those bits are absolutely fantastic, then you are in luck because you can get more content written by Azalin and 4 of the other Twitter Dark Lords. So there is a supplement on DM's Guild called The Mist Manuscripts, which was written by Azalin, Jacqueline Rainier, Strahd von Zarovic, Sturm von Zarovic, the sad middle child of the von Zarovic family, who is also the best of all of them, and that gosh dang broom from Death House. And each of them have written at least one domain. Jacqueline Rainier wrote 2. New domains, new Dark Lords, all wonderful flavors of horror. It's pay what you want. And the proceeds are going to go to Jasper's Game Day, which is a charity for suicide awareness and suicide prevention in the gaming community. That's a cause that's really near and dear to my heart and to the hearts of, I know, all of the Dark Lords. And you could also, WotC does take a cut, so you could always do the suggested $175 donation on the website and then head straight over to Jasper's Game Day's website and give a larger donation there so that they see more of it. Just, throwing that possibility out there. It's a wonderful supplement. I highly recommend it. Go check it out. Once again, it's called The Mist Manuscripts, and Dark Lords, you rule.
Thank you for listening, and happy gaming.
Parting thoughts. I do not know if I have ever felt so much relief upon leaving a domain as I did upon leaving Halloween Town. Maleficent's evil was terrifying, Scar's petty cruelty was destructive, but I would almost prefer either to Jack's joyfully alien mindset. The other lords knew themselves to be doing evil. The Pumpkin King believes himself to be a bringer of wonder and delight, even as the recipients of his whimsy beg him for mercy. When I at last entered the mists near the treehouse, my icicle mist talisman numbed my hand, but I didn't mind. The cold never bothered me anyway. Regards, D.
Though this report was not requested, my little scholar's devotion to her research has not gone without notice. If this king ever attempts to abscond with what is mine, he will experience the full extent of my displeasure. The magic tutelage bestowed upon you was not meant for parlor tricks. While Jack forces his people to participate in senseless festivities, Oogie Boogie appears to grasp the true spirit of what once was Halloween Town. It is no true revelation that this Pumpkin King's ceaseless pursuit of mimicking the role of another has created divided loyalties among his people. After all, it is often the people that suffer when their ruler forgoes responsibilities in favor of debauchery. Skellington operates on delusions of grandeur, yet there are signs of awareness of what he once was. For one, his laughter at the gruesome displays is akin to the evolution of autumn festivals. Perhaps a bit of his original spirit remains. For another, his willingness to turn a blind eye to the fate of those he has captured may act as a sacrifice, as their most likely fate is incorporation into Oogie Boogie's stew. I do wonder if Jack possesses the ability to retain one such as Isolde outside of her own carnival. If so, he may be more than a mere maniacal nuisance.
This has been The Wonderful World of Darklords. We have no affiliation with Disney or Wizards of the Coast. All music recordings used in this episode are in the public domain and were obtained through museopen.org. Titles and links are in the show notes. Dialogue for Yensid was written by Aslan Rex himself, who you can follow on Twitter at DarklordAslan. The Wonderful World of Darklords logo was designed by Haylight Jones. You can find links to their work in the show notes. Thanks for listening.
So, then I sneezed. Our thing we like to do here is talk about what type of story, what type of game you play in this setting. And there's some... Maybe we're not finishing tonight.
We're going to be too busy sneezing.
Yeah, right.
The hubris, the gods are punishing my hubris.